The wagon wheel splintered against the boulder just as the riverbank gave way beneath Priscilla Drake's feet. And in that terrifying instant when the brown water surged around her waist, she understood she was going to die in Montana territory at 22 years old without ever having truly lived. The flood had come so fast, swelling the normally placid creek into a roaring monster that swept away everything in its path, including the small wagon train she had been traveling with from Illinois. She heard screams, felt her feet lose purchase on the muddy ground, and then there was only cold, violent water pulling her under, filling her nose and mouth, dragging her downstream like she weighed nothing at all. Her lungs burned. Her heavy skirts tangled around her legs, pulling her down, and she clawed uselessly at the churning surface, catching glimpses of gray sky and cottonwood branches before going under again. This was it. This was how it ended. She thought of her mother's face, of the little house in Springfield she would never see again, of all the dreams she had harbored about starting fresh in the Western Territories. The water roared in her ears, and darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. Then something solid caught her around the waist, something strong and unyielding that fought against the current's pull. She felt herself being hauled upward, breaking the surface with a gasping, choking breath. Her vision was blurred with water and panic, but she was dimly aware of a horse's powerful body moving through the flood, of a man's arm locked around her middle, of a deep voice saying something she couldn't quite make out over the river's thunder. The world spun. She coughed up water, her whole body shaking violently. They were moving toward the bank, she realized, toward solid ground that seemed impossibly far away. The current fought them every inch, trying to reclaim her, but the man holding her never loosened his grip. His horse was strong, fighting through the flood with determination born of good training and trust in its rider. When they finally reached the muddy bank, when hands lifted her from the saddle and laid her on solid earth, Priscilla couldn't do anything but cough and retch up river water while her body trembled uncontrollably. She was vaguely aware of those same hands rolling her onto her side, helping her expel the water from her lungs, of a palm pressed firmly against her back as she heaved and gasped. "Come on, breathe. That's it. Get it all out." The voice was rough, masculine, tinged with concern. She tried to focus, tried to make sense of what had happened, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The cold had seeped into her bones, and despite being on dry land, she couldn't stop shaking. Her teeth chattered so hard she bit her tongue, tasting copper mixed with the mud and river water still coating her mouth. "We need to get you warm," the voice said, closer now, and then she felt herself being lifted again, cradled against something solid and warm. A chest. A man's chest. Strong arms held her securely, and she was too weak, too cold, too overwhelmed to do anything but let her head fall against his shoulder. The motion of walking rocked her like a cradle. She tried to open her eyes, tried to see who had pulled her from certain death, but her eyelids were too heavy. Exhaustion crashed over her like another wave, pulling her down into a different kind of darkness. This one was soft, though, quiet, safe. She didn't know how long she was lost in that darkness. Time became meaningless, marked only by vague impressions of warmth returning slowly to her limbs, of gentle hands removing her sodden clothing and replacing them with something dry and soft, of blankets being tucked around her. Once, she thought she felt someone checking her pulse, fingers pressed gently against her throat. Another time, she sensed rather than saw a fire crackling nearby, smelled wood smoke and coffee. When Priscilla finally clawed her way back to consciousness, the first thing she became aware of was warmth. Blessed, beautiful warmth that had chased away the terrible cold. The second thing was that she was being held, cradled against someone's chest with strong arms wrapped around her. The third thing was the steady thump of a heartbeat beneath her ear, solid and reassuring. She drew in a shaky breath and forced her eyes open. Her vision was blurry at first, but gradually focused on the rough weave of a cotton shirt, dark blue, worn soft from many washings. She could feel the rise and fall of the chest beneath her cheek, could hear that steady heartbeat continuing its rhythm. Priscilla shifted slightly, trying to make sense of where she was and what had happened. The movement must have alerted him, because the arms around her tightened fractionally, and that same rough voice she remembered from the riverbank spoke, closer now than before. "Easy. Don't try to move too fast." She tilted her head back, and for the first time, she saw the face of the man who had saved her life. The first thing she noticed were his eyes, a striking shade of gray-blue like storm clouds over the prairie. They were fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch, studying her face as though memorizing every feature. His jaw was strong, covered with several days' worth of dark stubble, and his hair was thick and brown, curling slightly where it brushed his collar. He looked to be in his late 20s, weathered by sun and wind in the way of men who spent their lives outdoors. "There you are," he said, and something in his expression shifted, tension easing from around his eyes. "You had me worried. You have been out for near 3 hours. 3 hours." Priscilla's mind felt sluggish, trying to catch up with everything that had happened. The flood, the wagon train. Oh God, the wagon train. The others, she managed, her voice coming out as barely more than a rasp. Her throat was raw from all the water she had swallowed. There were others. The wagons. Something dark flickered across his face. "I know. I went back after I got you settled, found 2 others downstream, got them to safety. The flood was too strong, came too fast. It washed out the whole crossing." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I am sorry. Some did not make it." The words hit her like a physical blow. Mrs. Henderson, who had shared her cornbread. Young Timothy Cooper, who had been so excited about starting a new life in Oregon. Mr. Patterson, who had led the wagon train with such confidence. All of them just gone, swept away by the merciless water. Tears burned in Priscilla's eyes, spilling over before she could stop them. She tried to turn away, tried to hide her grief from this stranger, but there was nowhere to go. She was still wrapped in his arms, still pressed against his chest, and all she could do was cry while he held her. "Let it out," he said quietly, one hand coming up to cradle the back of her head. "You have earned those tears. You survived something that would have killed most people." "I should have died with them," she whispered. "Why did I live when they did not? Because I got to you in time." His voice was firm, brooking no argument. "Because you fought to stay afloat long enough for me to reach you. Because that mare of mine is the bravest damn horse in Montana territory and would not quit even when the current tried to sweep us both away." He shifted, and she felt his hand move from the back of her head to her chin, tilting her face up so she had to meet his eyes. "You lived because you were meant to live. Do not waste that by wishing otherwise." The certainty in his voice, in his eyes, made something inside her chest crack open. She nodded mutely, unable to find words, and fresh tears tracked down her cheeks. They sat like that for a long moment, her crying quietly while he held her, his thumb brushing away tears even as new ones fell. Finally, when the storm of grief had passed and she could breathe without her chest hitching, Priscilla became acutely aware of their position. She was sitting in this man's lap, wrapped in blankets, wearing what she now realized was one of his shirts. Heat flooded her cheeks. "I should," she started, trying to extract herself from his embrace. "This is not proper." His arms tightened, not painfully, but enough to keep her from moving. Those storm cloud eyes fixed on her again, and there was something in them that made her heart skip. "Proper went out the window when I pulled you from that river," he said, his voice low and rough. You nearly died today. You are safe now. That is all that matters." "I do not even know your name," Priscilla said, though she made no further effort to escape his hold. The truth was, she felt safer here in this stranger's arms than she had in months, maybe longer. There was something solid about him, something dependable that made her want to burrow closer rather than pull away. "Ryder Brennan," he said. "I have a ranch about 5 miles west of here, up in the foothills. Raise cattle and horses, been here since right after the war ended." He paused, studying her face again with that intense gaze. "What is your name?" "Priscilla Drake, from Springfield, Illinois." The words felt strange in her mouth, like they belonged to someone else. The woman who had left Illinois 3 weeks ago felt like a different person than the one sitting here now. "I was traveling with the wagon train, heading to Oregon. There was supposed to be good land there, opportunities for teachers. You are a teacher." "I was. I wanted to be again." She looked down at her hands, pale against the dark wool of the blanket wrapped around her. "I suppose that does not matter now. Everything I owned was in that wagon. All my books, my clothes, my mother's jewelry, gone. Things can be replaced." Ryder's voice was matter-of-fact but not unkind. "You cannot." Priscilla looked up at him, struck by the certainty in his words. "You do not even know me." Something shifted in his expression, something that made her pulse quicken. His hand came up, rough fingers gentle as they tucked a strand of her still damp hair behind her ear. "Maybe not yet," he said, his voice dropping lower. "But I pulled you from that river, breathed life back into your lungs, held you while you shook with cold. That means something. That creates a bond." The way he was looking at her made Priscilla's mouth go dry. There was possession in that gaze, but also something warmer, something that made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced before. It should have frightened her. She should have been pulling away, insisting on propriety and proper distance, but she could not make herself move. "What are you saying?" she whispered. Ryder's thumb traced the line of her jaw, slow and deliberate. "I am saying that I did not pull you from that river just to let you go. I am saying that you are here now under my protection, and that is where you will stay." His eyes held hers, intense and unwavering. "You are mine now, Priscilla Drake, if you will have me." The words should have sounded arrogant, presumptuous. Instead, they sounded like a vow. Like a promise of safety and belonging that Priscilla had been searching for her entire life without even knowing it. "That is a bold claim to make to a woman you just met," she managed, though her voice came out breathless rather than indignant. "I know what I want when I see it." He did not look away, did not soften his words. "And what I want is you, safe, here with me." His expression softened slightly, though the intensity in his eyes never wavered. "But I am not a man who forces. If you want to leave, if you want me to take you to Montana City and put you on a stage back east, I will do it. But know this, I will spend every moment until you leave trying to convince you to stay." Priscilla's heart was hammering so hard she was certain he could feel it. This was madness. She had known this man for mere hours, most of which she had spent unconscious. She should be scandalized, offended even. Instead, she felt something warm and bright unfurling in her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. "I have nowhere to go," she admitted quietly. "No family back east anymore, no money for passage, no belongings beyond what you have given me. The wagon train is destroyed, and even if I could find another, I have no way to pay for it." "Then stay." The words were simple but weighted with meaning. "Stay here with me. Let me take care of you. Let me show you what it means to be treasured." "You do not know me," Priscilla repeated, but there was less conviction in her voice this time. "Then I will learn." Ryder's hand moved from her jaw to cup her cheek, his palm warm against her skin. "I will learn every detail, every preference, every dream you have ever had. I will learn what makes you laugh and what makes you cry and what makes you feel safe. I will learn you, Priscilla, if you give me the chance. She should say no. Every rule of propriety, every lesson she had ever learned about proper behavior between unmarried men and women, screamed that she should refuse. But when she looked into Ryder Brennan's eyes, she saw something that made all those rules seem foolish and small. She saw a man who meant every word he said, who would move heaven and earth to keep the promises he made. "All right," she whispered, and watched something fierce and triumphant flash across his face. "I will stay, for now. For now is enough to start." He pulled her closer, tucking her head back against his chest, and Priscilla let herself relax into his embrace. She could feel his heartbeat again, steady and strong, and for the first time since the water had closed over her head, she felt truly safe. They stayed like that as the fire burned low, as evening shadows lengthened across the small cabin Ryder had brought her to. Priscilla learned that this was a line shack, a small structure he used when working the far ranges of his property. The main ranch house was several miles away, larger and more comfortable, but he had brought her here because it was closest to where he had pulled her from the river. As the light faded, Ryder gently extracted himself from their embrace and stood, lowering Priscilla to the rough cot that served as the cabin's only bed. "You need food," he said, moving toward the small stove in the corner. "And rest. Real rest, not just unconsciousness." Priscilla watched him move around the small space with easy familiarity, building up the fire, setting a pot to heat. His movements were efficient, practiced, and she found herself wondering about this man who had swept into her life so dramatically. "Have you been ranching long?" she asked. "Going on 11 years now." He did not turn from the stove, but she could hear the pride in his voice. "Came out here right after Appomattox with nothing but a horse, a rifle, and a determination to build something of my own. Started with 20 head of cattle and a piece of land nobody else wanted. Now I have got near 500 head and 3,000 acres of good grazing land." He glanced back at her, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. "It has been hard work, but it is mine. Nobody can take it from me." "You built all that yourself?" "Mostly. I have got 3 hands who work for me, good men who have been with me for years. We work hard, but the land provides." He poured something from the pot into a tin cup and brought it over to her. "Drink this. It is just broth, but it will help settle your stomach." Priscilla took the cup gratefully, wrapping her cold hands around its warmth. The broth was simple but good, rich with the flavor of beef and herbs. She sipped it slowly, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you. For this, for saving me, for everything." Ryder settled into a chair near the cot, his long legs stretched out in front of him. In the firelight, his features looked softer, though no less determined. "You do not need to thank me for doing what any decent man would do." "Not any man would have risked his life in that flood," Priscilla pointed out. "The current was strong enough to sweep away wagons. You could have drowned trying to save me. But I did not." He met her eyes steadily, "and I would do it again in a heartbeat." They talked as she finished the broth, carefully at first, then with growing ease. Priscilla found herself telling him about Springfield, about her mother who had died the previous winter, about the teaching position she had held at the local schoolhouse, until budget cuts had eliminated her job. She told him about the loneliness of the past year, the sense that her life was slipping by without purpose or meaning, and the impulse that had driven her to join the wagon train west. "I wanted adventure," she admitted, her voice rueful. "I wanted to see something beyond the same streets I had walked my entire life. I wanted to matter, to make a difference somewhere. Does that sound foolish?" "No," Ryder's voice was firm. "It sounds brave. It sounds like a woman who knows her own worth and is not content to settle for less than she deserves." The words warmed her more than the broth had. Priscilla set the empty cup aside and pulled the blankets more tightly around herself. She was still wearing only Ryder's shirt, and she was acutely aware of how improper the situation was. Yet somehow, it did not feel wrong. It felt natural, as though they had known each other far longer than a single afternoon. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, wanting to hear more of his voice, to learn more about this man who had claimed her so boldly. "What is it like?" Ryder's expression softened, and for the next hour he painted pictures with words. He described the main house, built from logs he had cut himself, situated in a valley with a clear stream running through it. He told her about his horses, particularly the bay mare who had carried them both to safety, whose name was Tempest and who had more courage than sense. He described the rhythm of ranch life, the seasons marked by calving and branding and drives to market. He spoke of the Montana sky, vast and endless, and the way the mountains looked when snow first dusted their peaks in autumn. Priscilla listened, enchanted. The way he spoke made her see it all, made her want to see it with her own eyes. "It sounds beautiful," she said softly. "It is." He stood, moving closer to the cot. "And tomorrow, if you are feeling strong enough, I will take you there. You can see it for yourself, decide if it is somewhere you could imagine staying." "I already said I would stay," Priscilla reminded him. "For now, you said." Ryder reached down, his fingers gentle as he brushed hair back from her forehead. "I want more than for now. But I am a patient man when it matters. I can wait until you are sure." His touch sent warmth spreading through her, and Priscilla found herself leaning into it before she could think better of the impulse. "What if I am never sure? You will be." The confidence in his voice made it sound like a fact rather than a hope. "When you see the ranch, when you see what we could build together, you will be sure. I will make certain of it." He insisted she sleep on the cot while he made a bedroll on the floor, despite her protests. "You nearly drowned today," he said firmly. "You need real rest in a real bed such as it is. I have slept on harder floors than this." Priscilla wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her, making her limbs heavy and her eyelids droop. She burrowed into the rough blankets, breathing in the scent of wood smoke and leather, and something that must be uniquely Ryder. She heard him moving around the cabin, banking the fire, settling into his bedroll. The last thing she was aware of before sleep claimed her was the sound of his breathing, steady and close, and the knowledge that she was safe. She woke once in the night, disoriented and panicked, certain for a moment that she was back in the river, water closing over her head. A cry escaped her throat before she could stop it, and then Ryder was there, kneeling beside the cot, his hands on her shoulders. "Easy, you are safe. You are here with me, you are safe." Priscilla was shaking again, not from cold this time but from the lingering terror of the nightmare. Without thinking, she reached for him, and Ryder gathered her close, settling onto the cot and pulling her against his chest. "I am sorry," she managed, her voice muffled against his shirt. "I did not mean to wake you. Never apologize for needing comfort." His hand stroked her hair, soothing. "That river gave you a hell of a scare. It would be stranger if you were not having nightmares about it. Will you stay?" The words came out small, almost childlike, and Priscilla felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Just until I fall asleep again. I will stay as long as you need me." He shifted, making them both more comfortable, keeping her cradled securely against him. "Sleep, Priscilla. I have got you." She slept, and this time there were no nightmares, only warmth and safety and the steady beat of Ryder's heart beneath her ear. Morning came too soon, announced by pale sunlight streaming through the cabin's single window. Priscilla woke slowly, reluctantly, aware of warmth along her back and an arm draped over her waist. It took her a moment to remember where she was, what had happened, and when she did, she froze. Ryder was still on the cot with her, his larger body curved protectively around hers, his breathing deep and even in sleep. Sometime during the night they had shifted, settling into this position as naturally as if they had been sleeping beside each other for years. His arm was heavy across her waist, his hand splayed possessively over her stomach even in sleep. Priscilla knew she should move, should extract herself before he woke and found them in such a compromising position. But she could not make herself do it. This felt too good, too right. When was the last time anyone had held her like this? When was the last time she had felt this safe, this cherished? "You are awake." Ryder's voice was rough with sleep, his breath warm against her ear. His arm tightened fractionally, pulling her closer. "How do you feel?" "Sore," Priscilla admitted. Now that she was fully awake, she was becoming aware of various aches and pains. Her throat still felt raw and her muscles protested from yesterday's ordeal. But alive. Good. He did not move to release her, and Priscilla found she did not want him to. "We should probably get up. I need to check on Tempest and you need a proper breakfast. But this is nice." "It is improper," Priscilla felt compelled to point out, even though she made no move to disentangle herself. She felt rather than saw his smile. "Everything about this situation is improper by conventional standards. We passed proper somewhere around the time I stripped your wet clothes off and dressed you in my shirt." His hand moved on her stomach, a gentle, soothing motion. "But I do not care about proper. I care about right. And this feels right." It did feel right, impossibly so. Priscilla turned in his arms, needing to see his face. In the morning light he looked younger, more relaxed, though his eyes still held that intensity when they met hers. "Ryder, this is happening very fast. Some things do not need time." His hand came up, cupping her cheek. "When you know, you know, and I know that you are supposed to be here with me. I knew it the moment I saw you in that river, fighting to stay afloat. Something in my chest just locked into place and said mine." "That is not how it works," Priscilla protested weakly. "People do not just see each other and know. Do not they?" His thumb traced her lower lip, sending shivers down her spine. "Tell me you do not feel it. Tell me there is not something between us, something that started the moment I pulled you from that water. Tell me, and I will believe you." Priscilla opened her mouth to do exactly that, but the words would not come. Because she did feel it. This strange, intense connection that should not exist between two people who had only just met. She felt it in the way her heart sped up when he looked at her, in the way her body fit against his as though made to be there, in the way his touch seemed to reach somewhere deep inside her and warm places that had been cold for far too long. "I cannot," she whispered. "I cannot tell you that." Triumph and something warmer flashed across his face. "Then stop fighting it. Stop trying to make sense of it. Just feel it and let yourself believe that maybe, sometimes, things can happen this fast." He kissed her then, slowly and thoroughly, his lips gentle against hers. It was Priscilla's first real kiss, and it stole her breath and made her heart pound and convinced her that maybe Ryder was right. Maybe some things did not need time. Maybe some things just were. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. Ryder rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "We should stop." "Yes," Priscilla agreed, but neither of them moved. "I promised myself I would not rush you. That is good. I promised I would give you time to be sure. Very proper of you." He opened his eyes, and the heat in them made her shiver. "But you make it damn difficult to keep those promises." Priscilla surprised herself by smiling. "Good." They did manage to get up eventually, though it took more willpower than Priscilla would have thought necessary. Ryder stepped outside to give her privacy while she dressed in the clothes he had somehow dried overnight by the fire. Her dress was still damp in places and hopelessly wrinkled, but it was better than continuing to wear only his shirt. When she emerged from the cabin, Ryder was saddling Tempest, talking quietly to the mare as he worked. The horse was beautiful. Priscilla realized now that she could see her properly. Bay with a white star on her forehead, she stood calm and steady as Ryder checked her over for any ill effects from yesterday's ordeal. "She seems no worse for wear," Ryder said, noticing Priscilla's approach. "Stronger than both of us, this one." He patted the mare's neck affectionately. "She deserves all the oats I can give her for what she did yesterday." "I owe her my life," Priscilla said quietly, moving closer. Tentatively, she reached out to stroke the horse's nose. Tempest whuffled softly, her dark eyes curious but friendly. "Thank you," Priscilla whispered to the mare. "Thank you for being brave enough to save me." Ryder watched her with an expression that made her heart flutter. "She likes you. Tempest is not friendly with everyone, but she knows good people when she meets them." They shared a simple breakfast of cold biscuits and coffee. Then Ryder lifted Priscilla onto Tempest's back before swinging up behind her. His arms came around her to take the reins, and Priscilla allowed herself to relax back against his chest as they started toward his ranch. The morning was beautiful, she realized. The flood had passed, leaving the world washed clean and bright. The sun was warm on her face, and the Montana landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, vast and wild and magnificent. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still white with snow even though it was late June. Priscilla had never seen anything like it. "It is incredible," she breathed. "I knew the West was supposed to be big, but this is beyond anything I imagined." She felt Ryder's chest expand with a deep breath. "This is why I stayed. I could have gone anywhere after the war, could have gone back to Pennsylvania where I grew up. But the first time I saw this land, I knew I could never leave. It gets into your blood, this place, makes you part of it." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, following a trail that wound through rolling grassland dotted with cattle. Priscilla saw the Brennan brand on their hides, a simple R-bar-B that was clean and easy to read from a distance. The cattle looked healthy and well-tended, grazing peacefully in the morning sun. "How much of this land is yours?" she asked. "Everything you can see from here to those foothills." He pointed toward the mountains. "Bought some of it, claimed more through the Homestead Act, negotiated for other parcels from ranchers who were moving on. It has taken years to build it up to what it is now, but it was worth every minute of hard work." Pride rang clear in his voice, and Priscilla found herself proud for him, proud of what he had built from nothing. She thought of her small room in Springfield, of the limited life she had known there, and felt a surge of gratitude for the flood that had brought her here. It was a terrible thing to be grateful for, given the lives that had been lost, but she could not help feeling that somehow this was where she was meant to be. The ranch house came into view as they crested a low rise, and Priscilla caught her breath. It was larger than she had expected, a solid structure built from hewn logs, sitting in a protected valley with the stream Ryder had mentioned running clear and fast nearby. There was a barn, a corral with several horses, and what looked like a bunkhouse off to one side. Smoke rose from the chimney, and she could see a figure moving around near the barn. "That will be Charlie," Ryder said, following her gaze. "He is my foreman, been with me since the beginning. Best horseman I have ever known and loyal as they come. You will like him." As they drew closer, the figure near the barn straightened and turned toward them. Charlie was a man in his mid-30s, Priscilla guessed, weathered and lean with dark hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Those eyes widened slightly when he saw Priscilla sitting in front of Ryder, but he did not comment as they drew rein in front of the house. "Boss," Charlie said by way of greeting, then tipped his hat to Priscilla. "Madam." "Charlie, this is Miss Priscilla Drake. She was caught in the flood yesterday at the crossing. I pulled her from the river." Ryder's arms tightened around Priscilla, a gesture that did not go unnoticed by Charlie. "She will be staying with us." Charlie's eyebrows rose fractionally, but he only nodded. "Terrible business, that flood. We heard about it from riders who came through. They said the whole wagon train was swept away." "Not all of it," Ryder said grimly. "I got to 2 others besides Priscilla, got them to the line shack on the South Range, but there were losses." He paused. "Send word to Montana City about what happened. They will need to know to watch for survivors or recover what can be recovered." "Will do." Charlie's gaze flicked back to Priscilla, curious but not unkind. "Madam, I am sorry for your loss and glad you survived. You are welcome here." "Thank you," Priscilla managed, surprised by the acceptance she heard in his voice. Ryder dismounted, then reached up to lift Priscilla down. His hands were firm on her waist, and he held her just a moment longer than necessary before releasing her. "Come on, let me show you the house." The interior of the ranch house was sparse but clean, furnished with handmade furniture that showed skill and care in its construction. There was a large main room that served as kitchen, dining area, and living space, dominated by a stone fireplace big enough to stand in. A hallway led to what Priscilla assumed were bedrooms. "It is not fancy," Ryder said, watching her take it all in, "but it is solid and warm and mine. Ours if you decide to stay." Priscilla turned to look at him. This man who had saved her life and was now offering her a home, a future, a belonging she had never expected to find. He stood with his hands loose at his sides, trying to look casual, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the hope and uncertainty in his eyes. He was afraid she would reject this, she realized. Reject him. "Show me the rest," she said softly, and watched relief flash across his face. There were 3 bedrooms, one clearly Ryder's with its large bed and masculine furnishings, and 2 smaller ones that were clean but unused. "For the hands when weather is too bad for them to make it back to the bunkhouse," Ryder explained. "And for company, though I do not get much of that." He showed her the root cellar stocked with provisions, the well that provided fresh water, the small vegetable garden behind the house that was currently overgrown and neglected. "I am not much of a gardener," he admitted ruefully. "I can keep cattle alive, but plants seem to die just from me looking at them." Priscilla found herself smiling. "I can help with that. My mother taught me about growing things. It is too late for some crops this year, but there is still time for others if we work quickly." The moment the words left her mouth, she realized what she had said. "We," as though her staying was already decided. She looked up to find Ryder watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. "We," he repeated softly. "I like the sound of that." The day passed in a blur of activity. Ryder had work that needed doing, and he insisted on including Priscilla, refusing to let her sit idle or dwell on yesterday's tragedy. They checked on the cattle in the near pastures, rode out to one of the line shacks to leave supplies, and stopped at the bunkhouse so Ryder could introduce Priscilla to the other 2 hands, Jake and Tom, both of whom treated her with the same ready acceptance that Charlie had shown. By evening, Priscilla was exhausted, but in a good way, her muscles pleasantly tired rather than painfully sore. Ryder made dinner, revealing an unexpected competence in the kitchen, and they ate at the rough wooden table while golden light slanted through the windows. "You did well today," Ryder said as they cleared the dishes. "Most women who had been through what you experienced yesterday would still be abed, but you kept up without complaint." "I am stronger than I look," Priscilla replied. Then more quietly, "And staying busy keeps me from thinking too much about what I lost." Ryder caught her hand, stilling her movements. "I know, But you need to let yourself grieve too. What happened was terrible. You lost people you were traveling with, lost all your possessions. That deserves to be mourned. If I start mourning, I am afraid I will not stop, Priscilla admitted. I am afraid I will fall apart, and I cannot afford to do that. I need to be strong. You can be both. He pulled her closer, his free hand coming up to frame her face. You can be strong and still let yourself feel. You can grieve and still move forward. And you do not have to do any of it alone. I am here. The tears she had been holding back all day threatened to spill over. You barely know me. Why do you care so much? I told you. I knew the moment I pulled you from that river. You are mine to protect, mine to care for, mine to cherish. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, catching a tear that had escaped. That is not something I take lightly. When Ryder Brennan claims something, he keeps it. And I am claiming you, Priscilla Drake, if you will let me. This is insane, Priscilla whispered, but there was no conviction in her words. Maybe. He smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger, less guarded. But it is the best kind of insane. The kind that feels like coming home. She kissed him then, rising on her toes to press her lips to his, pouring into it all the emotion she could not yet find words for. Ryder made a sound low in his throat and pulled her flush against him, deepening the kiss until they were both breathless and clinging to each other. When they finally broke apart, both panting, Ryder rested his forehead against hers. You are making it very hard to be a gentleman. Maybe I do not want you to be a gentleman, Priscilla said, surprising herself with her boldness. His hands tightened on her waist. Priscilla, I meant what I said. I am not going to rush you. When we come together, I want you to be sure. I want you to choose me with your whole heart, not because you are grateful or feel obligated or because you have nowhere else to go. The words should have frustrated her, but instead, they only made her more certain. This man, who could easily take advantage of her situation, was choosing to give her time and space to be sure of her own feelings. How could she not fall for someone like that? What if I am already sure? She asked quietly. Something fierce and possessive flashed in his eyes, but he shook his head. Give it a week. Stay here for 1 week. Let yourself settle. Let yourself heal. If at the end of that week you still feel the same way, we will talk about what comes next. It was sensible, mature, exactly what she should have been suggesting herself. So why did it make her want to argue? And where will I sleep during this week? She asked. One of the spare rooms. I will make it comfortable for you. He released her, stepping back, and Priscilla immediately felt the loss of his warmth. I will be a perfect gentleman. I will give you no reason to doubt my intentions. Priscilla wanted to tell him she had no doubts, but the exhaustion of the day was catching up with her, making her sway slightly on her feet. Ryder noticed immediately, his arm coming around her to steady her. Bed, he said firmly. You have pushed yourself enough today. Come on. He led her to one of the spare rooms, which he had already made up with fresh linens while she was not looking. The bed was smaller than the one in his room but comfortable looking, and there was a pitcher and basin on the dresser, along with a towel. Tomorrow I will ride into Montana City and get you some proper clothes and necessities, Ryder said. For tonight, you can wear another of my shirts to sleep in. He left her to change, and Priscilla found herself smiling as she stripped off her still damp dress and pulled on the shirt he had left on the bed. It hung to her knees and smelled like him, and wearing it felt intimate in a way that made her pulse quicken. When she was settled in bed, Ryder appeared in the doorway, his eyes darkening when he saw her in his shirt. You look good in that, he said, his voice rougher than usual. Too good. Good night, Ryder, Priscilla said softly, pulling the blankets up. He stood there a moment longer as though fighting with himself, then nodded sharply. Good night, Priscilla. Call out if you need anything. I will hear you. He closed the door, leaving her in darkness lit only by the moonlight streaming through the window. Priscilla lay there, listening to his footsteps retreating down the hall, listening to the sounds of him preparing for bed in his own room. She should have felt strange, sleeping in a man's house with no chaperone, nothing to ensure propriety. Instead, she felt safe, protected, cherished. She thought of his words earlier. "You are mine now." Bold words, possessive words, but they had not frightened her. Instead, they had made something warm and bright bloom in her chest, something that felt like it might be hope or joy or the beginning of love. Maybe it was insane, falling for a man she had just met. Maybe in a week she would come to her senses and realize this was all a mistake born of trauma and gratitude. But as Priscilla drifted toward sleep, she did not think so. She thought that sometimes fate threw you into a raging river, and sometimes it sent a cowboy to pull you out. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was the beginning of something extraordinary. The week that followed was unlike any Priscilla had ever experienced. Ryder made good on his promise to be a gentleman, giving her space while simultaneously making her feel like the most important person in his world. Every morning, he woke early to start the work that kept the ranch running, but he always made sure she had breakfast waiting. Every evening he returned dusty and tired but with a smile for her, eager to hear how she had spent her day. On the second day, he rode into Montana City and returned with 3 dresses, a nightgown, undergarments, boots, and a host of other necessities. Priscilla had protested the expense, but he had waved her off, saying only that he took care of what was his. The possessive way he said it made her insides flutter. She quickly settled into the rhythm of ranch life. In the mornings, she tended the vegetable garden, coaxing neglected plants back to health and putting in seeds for late-season crops. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, finding satisfaction in bringing order and comfort to the space. She learned to cook the kinds of hearty meals that men who worked hard all day needed, and felt a quiet pride when Ryder and the hands cleaned their plates and asked for seconds. In the evenings, she and Ryder would sit on the porch and talk, sharing stories of their lives, their hopes, their dreams. She learned that he had fought for the Union, had been at Gettysburg and the Wilderness, and that the war had left scars both visible and invisible. She learned that he had grown up on a small farm in Pennsylvania, the youngest of 4 children, and that his entire family had died of typhoid the year before he enlisted. She learned that he loved this land with a fierce, abiding passion, that he dreamed of building something lasting, a legacy that would outlive him. In return, she told him about her childhood in Springfield, about her father who had been a lawyer and died when she was 12, about her mother who had taught her to read and love books and believe she could be anything she wanted. She told him about the loneliness of the past year, about feeling like a ghost in her own life, about the desperate hope that had driven her to join the wagon train. "I wanted to matter," she admitted one evening as they watched the sun set over the mountains. "I wanted to make a difference, to be remembered. Teaching let me do that for a while, but then the job was gone and I felt like I was disappearing." "You matter," Ryder said, his voice fierce. He reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "You matter to me. You matter to this place. In 1 week, you have made this house feel like a home instead of just a place I sleep. You have made me remember what it is like to look forward to the end of the day instead of just enduring until I can collapse into bed. You matter, Priscilla. Never doubt that." She kissed him then, under the vast Montana sky with the mountains standing witness, and it felt like a promise, like a vow. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Ryder's eyes were dark and intense. "The week is almost up," he said quietly. Tomorrow marks 7 days since I pulled you from that river. I know, Priscilla whispered, her heart pounding. Have you made a decision about staying about us? She looked into his eyes at the hope and fear and desire she saw there, and knew her answer had been decided long before the week was up. Maybe it had been decided the moment she woke in his arms and heard him say those bold, possessive words. Maybe it had been decided by fate the moment he plunged into that flood to save her. I want to stay, she said. I want this. I want you. I am sure, Ryder. The relief and joy that washed over his face made her chest ache. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, his arms tight around her. Thank God, he breathed. I was terrified you would want to leave, that this was all just gratitude or circumstance. It is more than that. Priscilla pulled back enough to look at him. I cannot explain it, but from the moment I woke up in your arms, I felt like I had come home. Like everything in my life had been leading me to that river, to you. I know it sounds mad. It does not sound mad. His hand cupped her cheek, his touch reverent. It sounds like exactly what I have been feeling, like we were meant to find each other. So what happens now? Priscilla asked. Now, Ryder smiled, and it was filled with such warmth and promise that it took her breath away. Now I marry you, properly with witnesses and everything legal. I ride into Montana City tomorrow and get the preacher. We do this right. That fast? Priscilla's eyes widened. Should we not wait, make sure? I have spent the last week being sure. His thumb traced her lower lip, making her shiver. I have spent every night lying in that bed wishing you were beside me. I have spent every day finding excuses to be near you, to touch you, to hear your voice. I am done waiting, Priscilla. I want to make you mine in every way that matters, unless you want to wait. Did she want to wait? Priscilla searched her feelings and found no hesitation, no doubt. Only certainty and a growing urgency to bind herself to this man who had saved her life and shown her what it meant to be cherished. No, she said firmly. I do not want to wait. Let us get married. The kiss he gave her then was searing, filled with relief and desire and promises of what was to come. When they finally broke apart, both of them were shaking. Ryder pressed his forehead to hers, his breathing ragged. Soon, he promised. Very soon, you will be Priscilla Brennan, and I will never have to spend another night without you. He did ride into Montana City the next morning, and he returned with Reverend Thomas, a jovial man in his 50s who had ministered to the small but growing town for the past 3 years. Charlie, Jake, and Tom served as witnesses, all of them grinning as they gathered in the ranch house's main room. Priscilla wore one of the dresses Ryder had bought her, a simple but lovely blue cotton that matched her eyes. She had no flowers, no veil, no traditional trappings of a wedding, but as she stood before the Reverend and looked into Ryder's eyes, she felt like the most cherished bride in the world. The ceremony was short and simple. They spoke vows promising to love and honor each other for all their days. Ryder's voice was steady and sure as he pledged himself to her, his eyes never leaving hers. When it came time for Priscilla to speak her vows, her voice shook slightly with emotion, but the words came from her heart. I promise to stand by your side through whatever comes, she said. I promise to make this house a home, to fill it with love and laughter. I promise to honor what you have built and help you build more. I promise to love you with my whole heart for as long as I live. Ryder's eyes shone suspiciously bright, and when the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a tenderness that made her eyes burn with happy tears. The hands clapped and cheered, and Reverend Thomas beamed at them both. I have married many couples in my time, he said, but rarely have I seen two people more clearly meant for each other. God bless you both. They celebrated with a fine dinner that Priscilla had prepared with help from Charlie, who turned out to be a surprisingly decent cook. There was roast beef and potatoes and fresh bread, and Charlie produced a bottle of good whiskey he had been saving for a special occasion. They toasted the newlyweds, and the hands told stories that made Priscilla blush and Ryder laugh, and the whole evening had a warmth and camaraderie that made Priscilla's heart swell. Finally, as the evening drew to a close, the hands made themselves scarce, returning to the bunkhouse with exaggerated winks and knowing grins. Reverend Thomas accepted the offer of one of the spare rooms for the night, as it was too late for him to safely return to town. And then, finally, Priscilla and Ryder were alone. They stood in the main room, suddenly shy despite everything. Ryder reached out, taking her hand and pulling her gently toward the hallway. "Come with me," he said softly. He led her to his room, which Priscilla now realized with a flutter of nerves was their room. A fire burned in the small fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The large bed had been made up with fresh linens, and someone had placed wildflowers in a jar on the dresser. "Charlie," Ryder said when he saw Priscilla looking at the flowers. "He has a romantic streak, though he would deny it if accused." Priscilla smiled, but her heart was hammering. She was a married woman now, and she knew what that meant. She wanted this, wanted Ryder, but she was also nervous and uncertain, her inexperience making her feel clumsy and inadequate. Ryder seemed to sense her nervousness because he moved slowly, giving her time to adjust. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "We do not have to do anything tonight," he said quietly. "I can just hold you if that is what you want. There is no rush." "I want this," Priscilla said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want you. I am just nervous. I have never done this before." Something possessive and tender flashed in his eyes. "I know. And I will be gentle, I promise. We will go slow, and if you want to stop at any point, you just say so. All right." She nodded, and he kissed her, slowly and thoroughly, until the nervousness began to fade, replaced by warmth and desire. His hands were gentle as he helped her out of her dress, as he removed his own clothing. His touch was reverent as he explored her body, learning her, treasuring her. And when they finally came together, when he made her truly his in every way, it was with a tenderness and care that brought tears to her eyes. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his arms around her. Priscilla felt changed, transformed in some fundamental way. She was Priscilla Brennan now, wife to this good, strong man, and the future stretched before them filled with possibility. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness, the first time she had said the words aloud. Ryder's arms tightened around her, and she felt him press a kiss to the top of her head. "I love you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "From the moment I pulled you from that river, I think, maybe even before. I love you, Priscilla, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." "I could never regret this," Priscilla said with complete certainty. "This is exactly where I am supposed to be." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, and Priscilla's dreams were sweet and full of promise. The months that followed were among the happiest of Priscilla's life. She threw herself into making the ranch house a true home, adding touches of comfort and beauty wherever she could. She made curtains for the windows from fabric ordered from the store in Montana City. She created a small herb garden near the kitchen door. She learned to churn butter and preserve vegetables, and 100 other skills that pioneer life demanded. But more than the physical work, she loved the life she was building with Ryder. They worked side by side when the demands of the ranch allowed, and she learned to ride well enough to help with some of the less strenuous tasks. In the evenings, They would sit together and read aloud from books ordered from back east, or simply talk, sharing thoughts and dreams and building the deep intimacy that came from truly knowing another person. The hands treated her with respect and affection, and Charlie in particular became a good friend. He taught her to play checkers and never let her win, which she appreciated. Jake taught her to shoot, insisting that any woman living on a ranch needed to know how to handle a gun. Tom, the youngest of the three, treated her with an almost brotherly protectiveness that touched her heart. By October, Priscilla knew she was pregnant. She recognized the signs from women she had known back in Springfield, though at first she could hardly believe it. When she was certain, she chose a quiet evening to tell Ryder. They were sitting on the porch, watching the first snow of the season dust the mountain peaks, when she took his hand and pressed it to her still flat stomach. "There is something I need to tell you," she said, her heart in her throat. Ryder looked at her, his brow furrowing with concern at her serious tone. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am more than all right," she smiled, hoping he could see the joy she felt. "I am with child. We are going to have a baby." The expression that crossed his face was one she would remember for the rest of her life. Shock, disbelief, and then pure, unfiltered joy. "A baby," he breathed. "We are having a baby in the spring, I think. Late April or early May." Ryder pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could hardly breathe. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet with unshed tears. "You have made me the happiest man alive," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "A wife I love more than life itself, a home that feels like paradise, and now a child. How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Priscilla said, her own eyes stinging with happy tears. "The day that River swept me away was the best and worst day of my life. I lost so much, but I gained everything that matters." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and filled with promise, and Priscilla felt her heart overflow with love for this man and the life they were creating together. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though winter in Montana tested Priscilla's fortitude. The snow piled high, and the temperatures dropped so low that ice formed on the inside of the windows. But the house was solid and warm, and Ryder was attentive to her every need, fretting over her like a mother hen, and driving her to fond exasperation with his protectiveness. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one afternoon in January when he insisted on carrying her over a patch of ice between the house and the barn. "You are carrying my child," he countered, his jaw set stubbornly. "That makes you precious cargo. I am not taking any chances." Priscilla rolled her eyes but could not help smiling. His devotion, even when it manifested as excessive protectiveness, was endearing. As winter gave way to spring and her belly swelled with their growing child, Priscilla sometimes thought back to that terrifying day in the flood. She thought about the woman she had been then, lonely and searching, uncertain of her place in the world. She thought about how close she had come to dying, how different her life would be if Ryder had been even a minute later reaching her. But he had not been late. He had been exactly on time, arriving at the precise moment fate demanded. And from that day forward, her life had been transformed in ways she could never have imagined. The baby came on a warm May evening, arriving with the same dramatic flair that had characterized her parents' meeting. Priscilla's labor was intense but mercifully short, and when the midwife from Montana City finally placed the squalling infant in her arms, Priscilla looked down into her son's red, furious face and fell instantly, completely in love. "A boy," Ryder breathed, his eyes wide with wonder as he looked at his son. "We have a son." "What should we name him?" Priscilla asked, exhausted but happier than she had ever been. Ryder reached out, his large, work-roughened hand gentle as he stroked the baby's downy head. What about Matthew? It was my father's name, Matthew Brennan. Priscilla tried it out, liking the sound of it. It is perfect. They both looked down at their son, this tiny person they had created together, and Priscilla felt her heart expand to accommodate this new, overwhelming love. She had thought she understood love when she married Ryder, but this was different. This was primal and fierce and all-consuming. "I will protect you both with everything I have," Ryder said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "I will build something that will last, something to pass on to him and his children after him. I will make sure he knows he is loved every single day of his life." "I know you will," Priscilla said, reaching up to touch his face. "You are a good man, Ryder Brennan, the best man I have ever known." He kissed her then, carefully, mindful of her exhaustion, and the three of them stayed like that for a long time. A family, complete and perfect and right. The years that followed were full of hard work and simple joys. The ranch continued to prosper under Ryder's capable management, and he began buying adjacent land, expanding their holdings. Matthew grew into a sturdy, inquisitive toddler with his father's gray eyes and his mother's quick smile. When he was 2, Priscilla gave birth to twins, a girl they named Sarah and another boy they called James, and the house rang with the sounds of children's laughter. Priscilla had never been so tired in her life, but she had also never been happier. She loved being a mother, loved watching her children grow and learn and become their own people. She loved the partnership she had with Ryder, the way they worked together to build not just a ranch but a legacy. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were finally asleep, she and Ryder would sit on the porch and look out at the land they were shaping, at the cattle peacefully grazing, at the mountains standing eternal watch in the distance. "You ever regret it?" Ryder asked one such evening, his arm around her shoulders. "Staying here, choosing this life. You could have been a teacher in Oregon, living in a town with amenities and culture. Instead, you are stuck on a ranch in the middle of nowhere with a husband who smells like cattle and 3 children who keep you running from dawn to dusk." Priscilla turned to look at him, at this man who had saved her life, and then given her a reason to live it with joy. "I regret nothing," she said firmly. "This life, this place, you and our children, this is everything I never knew I wanted. I would not trade it for anything in the world. Good." He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple, "because I have no intention of letting you go. You are mine, remember. I claimed you that very first day, and I am never going back on that claim." Priscilla smiled, remembering those words, remembering waking up in his arms with water still on her skin and terror in her heart. "You are mine now," she repeated softly. "Those were the first words I heard when I woke up in your arms. They should have frightened me, but they did not. They made me feel safe." "You are safe," Ryder promised. "You always will be. I will spend the rest of my life making sure of it." When Matthew was 5, Priscilla began teaching him to raid, using books she ordered from back east. The twins were still too young, but they liked to sit with their brother during lessons, listening to the stories their mother read. Priscilla had not realized how much she missed teaching until she began working with Matthew, and she found deep satisfaction in watching his mind open to the world of written words. "You are a natural teacher," Ryder observed one afternoon, watching from the doorway as she patiently guided Matthew through a difficult passage. "Have you ever thought about teaching the other children around here? I know several ranch families who would pay to have their children educated." Priscilla looked up, surprised. "You would not mind?" "Why would I mind?" He came into the room, settling into a chair. "You are brilliant and educated, and it would be a waste to keep that all to ourselves. Besides, I know you love teaching. If it would make you happy, then I am all for it." She smiled at him, her heart swelling with love for this man who understood her so well. "Let me think about it. Maybe when the twins are a bit older." In the end, she did start teaching, opening a small school in one of the unused outbuildings that Ryder converted for the purpose. Children from neighboring ranches came twice a week, and Priscilla found joy in passing on her love of learning to this new generation of Montana children. It was different from teaching in Springfield, more rustic and makeshift, but somehow more rewarding. These children truly needed what she could give them, and their parents were grateful in a way that moved her deeply. As the children grew older and the ranch continued to prosper, Priscilla and Ryder began hosting gatherings, bringing together the scattered ranching families for dances and dinners and celebrations. The ranch house, once so quiet and isolated, became a center of community, a place where people came together to support one another through the challenges of frontier life. Through it all, Priscilla never forgot that terrible day in the flood, never forgot the people who had died. Every year on the anniversary, she would place wildflowers by the river and say a prayer for the souls lost. It was important to her that her children understand how fragile life was, how quickly everything could change, and how important it was to cherish every moment. "Why do we come here every year?" Matthew asked one June day when he was 8, standing by the river with his parents while his younger siblings played nearby under Charlie's watchful eye. "Because this is where your mother was reborn," Ryder said, his arm around Priscilla's waist. "This is where everything changed for both of us. We come here to remember that life is precious, and that sometimes terrible things lead to beautiful outcomes." "Tell me the story again," Matthew requested, as he did every year. So Priscilla told him, told all her children as they gathered close. She told them about the wagon train, about the flood, about the terrifying moment when the water closed over her head, and she thought she was going to die. She told them about feeling strong arms wrap around her, about being pulled to safety by a man on a brave horse. She told them about waking up in their father's arms and hearing the words that had changed her life. "You are mine now," she quoted, smiling at Ryder. "That is what your father said to me, bold as brass, claiming a woman he had just met." "It was true then, and it is true now," Ryder said, pulling her close. "You are mine and I am yours, and together we built something that will last long after we are gone." Priscilla looked at her children, at her husband, at the land spread out around them, and felt nothing but gratitude. She thought about the woman she had been before the flood, lost and searching and unsure of her purpose. That woman seemed like a stranger now. The Priscilla she was today was strong and certain, rooted in this place and this life in a way she had never been rooted before. "I love you," she told Ryder, the words as true and deep as they had been the first time she said them. "I love you too," he replied, his eyes warm. "Every day more than the day before. You are my heart, Priscilla Brennan." The children made faces at their parents' display of affection, but they were smiling, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and wanted. They grew up strong and confident, shaped by the wild Montana landscape and their parents' devotion to each other and to the land. When Matthew was 16, Ryder began teaching him how to run the ranch, passing on the knowledge and skills he had spent years accumulating. Sarah showed an aptitude for horses that rivaled Charlie's, spending every free moment in the barn. James, quieter than his siblings, developed a love of books that pleased his mother immensely. More children came as the years passed, until the ranch house echoed with the sounds of 5 children in all. The ranch continued to prosper, becoming one of the most successful operations in Montana territory. Ryder's reputation for fairness and integrity grew, and people came to him for advice and mediation in disputes. Through it all, Through busy seasons and quiet winters, through challenges and triumphs, Priscilla and Ryder remained as devoted to each other as they had been from the beginning. They still sat on the porch in the evenings, still talked for hours about everything and nothing. They still looked at each other with the same heat and tenderness that had characterized those early days. You ever wonder what would have happened if you had not been there that day? Priscilla asked one evening when they were both in their 40s, their children grown or nearly so. What if you had been working a different section of the ranch? What if someone else had pulled me from the river? Ryder considered the question seriously. I do not think anyone else could have reached you in time, and as for me being there, I do not think it was an accident. I think we were meant to find each other, meant to build this life together. Call it fate or providence or just blind luck, but it brought us together, and I will be grateful for it every day until I die. So will I, Priscilla said softly. She looked out at the land they had shaped, at the house they had filled with love and laughter, at the legacy they were leaving for their children. We built something good here. We did, Ryder agreed. And it all started the day I pulled a beautiful, stubborn woman from a flooded river and told her she was mine. Priscilla laughed, the sound warm and full. I was not stubborn. You were. You are. It is one of the things I love most about you. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Thank you for choosing me, for choosing this life. You made every dream I ever had come true. We made them come true together, Priscilla corrected, tilting her face up for his kiss. Everything we have, we built as partners. When Matthew married a local rancher's daughter and brought her to live at the ranch, Priscilla helped them build a house on a piece of the property that Ryder deeded to them. It felt right, seeing her son putting down roots on this land, continuing what she and Ryder had started. Sarah married a horse trader and moved to a ranch 20 miles west, close enough to visit regularly. James showed no interest in ranching and instead became a lawyer, the first in the family to attend university back east, though he returned to Montana to practice. As Priscilla and Ryder grew older, they gradually handed over more of the ranch operations to Matthew and his wife, though Ryder never fully retired. He loved the work too much, loved the land too much to ever truly step away. Priscilla continued teaching until arthritis made it too painful to write on the chalkboard, and even then she tutored individual students in her home. They had been married for 35 years, when Ryder fell ill with pneumonia one harsh winter. Priscilla nursed him through it with the same fierce determination he had shown in pulling her from the river all those years ago. And her devotion pulled him through, when the doctor had all but given up hope. You are not allowed to leave me, she told him on the worst night when his fever raged and he barely knew her. You promised me a lifetime, Ryder Brennan, and I am holding you to that promise. Do you hear me? You stay with me. He fought, and he lived, and when he was finally well enough to sit up and take notice of the world again, the first thing he said was, "You are bossy when you are worried." Priscilla burst into tears of relief and hit him gently on the shoulder. Do not you ever scare me like that again. I will do my best, he promised, pulling her into his arms with what strength he had recovered. But you should know by now that I am not going anywhere. I told you that first day you are mine. That means I have to stick around to look after you. They had nearly 20 more good years together after that scare. Years filled with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, with the continued prosperity of the ranch, with the deep satisfaction that comes from a life well lived. They grew old together, their bodies aging but their love never dimming. Priscilla was 72 when Ryder died peacefully in his sleep, one spring morning, his hand clasped in hers. She held him and cried, her heart breaking even as she gave thanks for the incredible life they had shared. He had been her savior, her partner, her great love, and now he was gone. but he had left her with so much. 5 children who adored her, 15 grandchildren, 7 great-grandchildren, and a legacy that would continue for generations. The ranch still stood, more prosperous than ever under Matthew's management. The school she had started still operated, now in a proper building in Montana City. The community they had helped build thrived, bound together by the values of hard work and integrity that Ryder had exemplified. Priscilla lived another 5 years after Ryder's death, surrounded by family, still sharp and engaged with the world. And when she finally passed, peacefully and without pain, she was buried next to Ryder on a hill overlooking the ranch, where they could watch over the land and the family they had created together. On her headstone, Matthew had carved the words that had started it all. "You are mine now." And beneath it, "And I was his from that day until forever." The story of the cowboy who pulled a woman from a flooded river became legend in Montana, told and retold by their descendants. It became a story about fate and courage, about love that defied logic and reason. It became a story about how sometimes, in the worst moments of our lives, we find exactly what we need to become who we are meant to be. And on warm June evenings, when the mountain peaks glowed pink with sunset and the cattle grazed peacefully in the valleys, people said you could sometimes see 2 figures sitting on the porch of the old Brennan ranch house, close together, watching over the land and the legacy that love had built. Some things, after all, are too strong to be bound by something as simple as death. Love like theirs, forged in terror and triumph, nurtured through years of partnership and devotion, was eternal. It lived on in the land they had shaped, in the children they had raised, in the community they had helped build. It lived on in the story that was told to each new generation, a reminder that sometimes the worst day of your life can also be the beginning of the best. Priscilla Drake had gone into that river alone and afraid, uncertain of her place in the world. She had come out of it in the arms of a man who saw her worth immediately and completely, who claimed her with bold words and then spent the rest of his life proving he meant them. And together, they had built something that would last long after they were gone, a testament to the power of love to transform and endure. Years turned to decades, and the Brennan Ranch continued to thrive under the stewardship of Priscilla and Ryder's descendants. The main house was expanded and modernized, but the porch where the couple had spent so many evenings remained unchanged, a place of pilgrimage for family members who wanted to feel close to their remarkable ancestors. The story of how it all began, of the flood and the rescue and the bold claim that had started a legendary love story, was told at every family gathering. Children grew up hearing about their great-great-grandmother, who had survived certain death, and their great-great-grandfather, who had been brave enough to ride into a raging flood to save a stranger. It became part of the family identity, a touchstone that reminded them all that courage and love could overcome anything. And so the legacy continued, generation after generation, all of it traced back to one terrifying moment in a flooded river, to one man who refused to let a woman drown, to words spoken with absolute certainty in a small line shack. "You are mine now." Those words had proven prophetic in ways even Ryder could not have imagined that day. Priscilla had indeed been his, and he had been hers, bound together by something stronger than law or convention. They had been bound by choice and commitment, and a love so deep it had become the foundation for everything that came after. Their story proved that sometimes the most important moments of our lives come when we least expect them. That sometimes losing everything we thought we wanted opens the door to finding what we truly need. That sometimes being saved is just the beginning of the real adventure. And so the story ends where it began, with water and courage and love. With a cowboy who saw a woman fighting for her life and did not hesitate. With words spoken in the aftermath of trauma that became a promise kept for a lifetime. With two people who found each other in the chaos and chose to build something beautiful together. In the end, it was a simple story, really. A man saved a woman, they fell in love, they built a life. But in its simplicity was its power because it showed that the most profound truths are often the most straightforward. Love, courage, commitment. These are the things that matter, the things that endure, the things that create legacies worth leaving. And on that Montana ranch, where the mountains still stand watch and the stream still runs clear and swift, the legacy of Priscilla and Ryder Brennan continues. Their story lives on, a reminder that fate can arrive on the worst day of your life, riding a brave horse into a deadly flood and speak the words that change everything. You are mine now. Forever and always, that truth remained. She was his, and he was hers, and from that day forward, nothing would ever be the same. It was an ending that was also a beginning, a conclusion that promised continuation, a love story that transcended time itself to become legend. And they lived and loved and left the world better than they found it. What more could anyone ask of a life well lived? What more could anyone hope for than to be remembered as two people who found each other against all odds and chose to hold on through everything that followed? Nothing. There was nothing more. Their story was complete, their circle closed, their legacy secured. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, Priscilla and Ryder Brennan were together still, watching over the land and the family they had created, satisfied with the knowledge that their love had truly conquered all.